friend. Back
How
for
are
a
you
chat.
doing? It's been a while.
It's been a while. Well, for anyone watching this, it hasn't been a while. We pretty much talk every day. We just haven't done one of these chats and recorded it. So it's well overdue. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I love these conversations. We spent a lot of time on this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we can see, and as everyone watching this can probably see, things are amping up. So we've just had our conference, our general conference. Thoughts from that?
I thought it was very tame, to be fair.
Yeah, I'd
No,
say
I'm
vanilla.
always,
I'd say vanilla.
yeah,
They're too
you
vanilla
know,
for me now.
yeah, I'm always. I mean, I've been very blessed in my church life. Been there obviously 37 years. You know, I've had apostles. The first, in fact, within months of joining the church back in '85. Bruce, was it Bruce Armick? Yeah, I think it was Bruce McConkie came to our ward, and it was like he'd come just to speak to me. I was raw, I was new, and I was looking for answers and all that stuff, and it was almost like he was just talking to me. And then over the years, we've had President Hinckley here twice. We've had Elder Holland, just as he was called onto the apostleship, and then we've had Elder Ballard. So we've been blessed as a stake and as a ward, and we've had our leaders, instead of just being in Salt Lake, we've actually had them in our home ward. So it's been great. So I've always looked at conference as, I'm waiting for something really to motivate and to inspire, and to give me the direction that I need for the next 6 months. And I just thought this year there wasn't really anything that I kind of picked up on, to be fair. Great talks, particularly like the Elder Holland's talk, talking about the cross and the Savior and the atonement and how all of that worked. But other than that, I thought it was, to use the word, it was very general, I thought. What about yourself?
General. Yeah. I suppose I get a little bit disillusioned because I can see, like, we can see the state that the world is in. I would think that if we have a mouthpiece of God here, I think this is just we should have just had more. We should have more in an advantage, I suppose, being led. Which I get now that it's not about being led by a person, or an organization. It's about being led by the Savior himself. So, I mean, while I'm a bit annoyed on this hand, I'm actually grateful that I've learnt to follow the Savior directly on this hand. So, yeah, like you said, it was very fluffy. It was very vanilla. It was very, nice fluffy feelings and things like that. But I think the time for nice fluffy feelings is done.
I mean, my own personal view, I think since, Elder Nelson's been called as prophet, I think, I always think, like we can look at our bishops and our stake presidents, and they seem to always have a reason why they were called. Well, I think, apostles and prophets are the same. I think back to President Hinckley's time, and he was very much about driving temples, building them more and more and more. And then, we look at what's gone on in the world, certainly over the last 3 years with, the pandemic and various things. You can see why somebody who has, a knowledge of the health profession would be the prophet of today. And then if you look at potentially, who would replace him.
You'd think somebody with a medical profession would have been able to see through the bullshit.
Well, I think going back to what you said, I think I personally, I was looking on what was going on, particularly after losing Pat to COVID, and I asked myself, would it have been right for a prophet to, to stand up and say, well, actually, this is BS and blah blah blah. And my take on that, having given a lot of thought, and that point, at some points was quite angry and upset and hurt that perhaps he didn't. I did come to the conclusion that he probably, even if he knew it was, and probably does know it was, he couldn't have said it. And the reason why he couldn't have said it was because it would have shut the church down.
Yeah, I
Missionary work.
understand that. I
Yeah,
understand that because, like a church shouldn't be taking like people should be left to make their choices, but the fact that
yeah,
the urge came, that's
yeah.
now we've very much turned into, when I had a channel with Zach before it was taken down, we were the Mormon and the misfit. Now I feel like you and I are the Mormon and the misfit. I'm the misfit.
No, I would disagree. Well, yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from, but I had this talk with Brett the other day when I was talking to Brett and Tracy
Yeah.
about this, this thing that we're going to talk about Missouri in a bit.
Mm.
And, I said to him, I've gone from I was elders quorum president within 6 months of joining the church. I got called onto I was the youngest person to ever serve on the High Council for 15 years. Gone through every, other than a bishop and stake presidency, I've served just about everywhere else.
Mm.
But the last 4 years, I haven't even been given the sacrament talk. And
No.
I thought, hold on, I've been a Sunday school teacher, I've been a stake Sunday school teacher, president, I've been a stake mission president, talking, teaching the gospel, and now I haven't had a talk for 4 years.
Yeah, well, that's
And
like Brett. Brett
yeah,
has never
that's
asked
what,
to talk. It's
yeah,
like,
that,
I mean, I haven't, but I haven't been to church since they turned me away at the door. So,
yeah,
but it's just like it's really, really weird, and it's really blatantly
yeah.
obvious all of a sudden.
Well, I kind of, is it me? Is it, am I just seeing something? But I've always felt, and going back to what you're saying about being led by the Spirit, and again, this is what I felt President Nelson was called for, was he emphasized that the church was going to the home. It was to be taught in the home. Your spirituality. You were to immerse yourself in scriptures in the home. You were to
Yeah.
teach your children in the home. And we've had this conversation. Before Pat passed away. 6 months before that, I'd gone to my bishop and I said, "Look, I'm writing a book, but it's not a book that a lot of church members would openly read." I said it's questioning a lot of doctrine. And I'm asking myself, well, why aren't our leaders saying this stuff? Because here it is, and it's in black and white, it's plain to read. I wasn't revealing anything that wasn't in the scriptures, but clearly scriptures that we don't discuss, we don't talk about.
Oh,
And I'm saying, why? And
hi.
anyway, why aren't we talking about it?
Yeah.
And again, the conclusion, I'm speaking to Tracy the other day, she's a Sunday school teacher too. There just seems to be a level, and I can go back 37 years, and I'm sure you can go back a considerable number as well. The 4 year educational plan that the church brings out, it hasn't changed.
No.
37 years, it hasn't changed. I'm reading, I could go back to 1985, get the 4 gospel manuals, Book of Mormon,
Mm.
Pearl of Great Price, Doctrine and Covenants, in the Bible. And I could use the same books today for the lessons. Nothing has changed. And as you say, politically, culturally, I mean, look what's going on, even down to, sexual orientation now. Boy, oh boy, where are we compared to 37 years ago? The men are women and the women are men these days.
And
What is
if you say anything about it, you're
yeah.
evil.
And in fact, funnily enough, I was just literally with 2 hours ago watching a video all about how even God's covenant with humanity, that He would never send the flood again. The rainbow has been confiscated by these people. The rainbow is now associated with LGBT plus 5.5 minus 3. That group, they've confiscated what is perhaps the greatest symbol of God's covenant with humanity, other than Christ on the cross. That rainbow was His promise to us that He would never, send the flood again. And that's been taken. That's been, what's the word, shanghaied or, stolen, kidnapped, and the whole. But why aren't our prophets standing out against that, saying, "Hold on"?
And the issue, that one of the issues too that I'm struggling with is that you know, as members of the church, we're always different. We were a peculiar people. That's the word that
Yeah.
was it Gordon B. Hinckley used. We were a
I think it was
peculiar
Gordon B.
people.
Hinckley,
People
yeah.
looked at us and thought,
Yeah.
oh, they're different. They're strange, right?
Yeah.
We're not strange anymore. We
No,
we are
not at
we
all.
are blending with Babylon, and to me, that's not right. So I've got this struggle going on internally now where I believe in the Book of Mormon and everything that's in there. I believe it 100% wholeheartedly, but I can't marry it up with what's going on in the church at the moment. So,
And I
so
think that,
I've got this thing going on where the chapel down the road, we're taught to meet together oft. You know,
yeah.
they're not my people anymore. It's like, where are who are my people? That's my struggle at the moment.
And that's where I think leads into why, you know, we said we do this talk,
Yeah,
because, you know, going back over our, our channel 2 or 3 years ago, we were saying that this particular period of time, 2022, 23, 24,
yeah,
they're very much aligning with what I believe, and I shared this with my daughters the other day. You know, we've had, if we look back at the seven, Joseph is, sorry, Pharaoh's dream, where Joseph interpreted as 7 years of plenty, and then 7 years of famine. I think we are at that precipice. You know, we've had 7 years where, the stock market's been in an all-time high, house prices, all the wealth that's been generated over the last 7 years, and we've been part of that. We've experienced that, and now we're tipping, we're going over the hill, and it's coming. And I do believe we're going into 7 barren years. Uh, yeah, 2 weeks ago, we couldn't even go to a local shop and buy milk. There was no milk in Liverpool. It was like the shock.
what?
Seriously, bread.
How did
Bread
people
was,
have their cups of tea in England?
well, they have to go on the hard stuff, the coffee. But even bread and the shelves were dropping. And again, this was this thing about, the 7 years of famine. There's no wheat for the milk. There's no milk. There's no cows. There's no hay. All that stuff. So I think and what is interesting, going back, 2 or 3 years, we were saying that whatever was going to happen in this, what I think is potentially the 7 years running up to what I would call the full return of Christ. But I do think there are some events on the, along the path before that. So for me, it was this thing about, if we're going through scarcity, and I'm seeing it, petrol prices have gone so high that even businesses can't afford to even haulage, because the profit margin between taking stuff to a shop and not taking it is very narrow.
Yeah,
So some companies are going out of business, or there's a shortage of drivers, there's a shortage of haulage firms, and that has a massive impact on the food distribution around the world.
yeah,
Imagine how much it costs for a ship to go around the world with its cargo, etc.
yeah.
So I think we are now where we said we would perhaps be, and sadly, I don't think it's going to get better.
No,
I
well,
do think
definitely not going to get better. The thing
it's a decline
I saw a
path.
funny, well, not funny. I saw a meme the other day. Soon it's going to be, because we know there's this massive transfer of wealth happening as well at the same
Yeah.
time. Depending on choices we make now, it's going to be a division. It's going to be the have yachts and the have nots.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah, I like that, and
yeah,
yeah,
like it
and
was
again that,
funny, but it was true. There was a picture of them eating
yeah,
bugs, but
yeah.
that's where it's going to end up. There's going to be no middle ground anymore. You can either feed your family or you can't.
Yeah, and I raised that in some of our last couple of conversations in our groups, because having worked in the financial industry, and certainly for the last, well, certainly 10 years, I've been very closely following the military system. And I think it was a week on Monday, I was on a call with mortgage brokers and bankers, and they are running scared, uh, to the point, and this might help particularly our US listeners, because we've got a friend, a mutual friend. I won't mention his name, but you'll know who I'm talking about when I say what I'm saying. Is he's bought a piece of property next door to where he lives, and he was looking on taking on a big mortgage to renovate it. And on the Friday, a week Friday, that mortgage was going to cost him 800 British pounds a month because of the rise in interest rates. Everything that didn't close business on the Friday evening, 5 p.m. UK time, was pulled off the shelf on Monday because of the interest rate. That same person, in conversation with him yesterday, funnily enough, I asked him, how are you going on with it? He said, that same mortgage that I could have got for 800 is now going to cost £3,000.
A month, and that's how much it's gone up.
That's how bad it is. Now, the last time this happened was in the 2012 crash and the 2008 crash, and that didn't really go unnoticed to 2006. Now, I'm old enough to remember the 2006 because I was 20 years into my mortgage at that time, and I was paying 160, and mine went from 5% to 12.5%. So my mortgage went from 140 to over 480. So I've experienced that, and I'll tell you now, Kirsten,
Crushing.
we we were, we were quite, I wouldn't say we were wealthy, but we were doing all right. We both had jobs. In fact, I had two jobs, and then even Pat had two jobs. So we always made sure that we gave the best that we could. Now, here was the thing. At that time, we were going abroad 2 times a year. We were, going out for meals
Living.
once,
You were
twice a
living.
week.
Yeah.
Yeah, enjoying life. Well, we couldn't go out for a meal anymore.
Nope.
We couldn't go out. No, we didn't go abroad for 4 years. And to say that all of the lavish foods that we would eat, we couldn't. And to the point, we had to really, now luckily enough, we had a caravan that we previously bought down in Wales. So all of our holidays were literally just going to the caravan, which was still lovely because we loved Wales anyway. But we had to really tighten our belt. So I know what a financial crash looks like because I've experienced it. But here's the thing, Kirsten, most people now, and I've been in conversation with some of our community over the last week, because I fear for them because they've been buying mortgages at 1, 2, 2.5%. In fact, one of your nephews has got a very, very precarious position because he bought one at 2.5%. And even now, is looking at 7 or 8% after 2 years. My daughter, the same, 3.5%, looking at possibly 7, 8 in 2 years' time. So going back to what you were saying before, if you don't do something now, you're going to become victim of that, and you will become a victim of that. My daughter is facing the £1,200 mortgage in the next 2 years if I don't do something now. So what does Paul Gunson do about it? Well, I can sit by and ignore it, put my head in the sand and say, nah, it won't affect me, or learn from the lessons of history, which is a famous quote by Winston Churchill. If you look far enough into the history, you can actually see the future. So I know that 2 years from now, my daughter won't even be able to afford a mortgage, let alone have one.
Imagine what's going to happen in the next 2 years. Like, things escalate within days and weeks at this rate.
Absolutely. So, okay, we're in the world of crypto and DeFi, and so we know what's coming. So we've put plans in place. So I made the conscious decision this week that I've got to do something drastic, and I mean drastic. So I made a decision, not to the liking of anybody, that I'm going to sell my house. And I've got the guy coming tomorrow. He's preliminarily given me a price. It releases 60,000 equity on my property. So I'm going to use that to mitigate that rising cost. So I'm, you know what we're doing, so you'll know where my funds are going, because I need to make sure that I have some vehicles that while that transfer of wealth takes place, I don't become a victim of it, because wealth is never lost, it's just transferred.
Yeah.
So traditionally, it would have gone into gold and silver, and perhaps still may very well go into gold and silver. But there is a new kid on the block, and it's called cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
It wasn't here in 2006, interestingly enough. So I find that quite inspirational, because 2009, when Bitcoin, for those who don't understand Bitcoin, and there are many even on this who watch this channel might not even be aware of it. When that came about, it revolutionized or will revolutionize and be a revolution against what is our current banking system. And those who understand it will profit from it, and those who don't will pay for it. So, I do consider, and going on to where I think this conversation will end up, is I felt for many, many years that I had to be educated in money. And I am the worst person with money. Money would go through my hands like water would go through it. So I was never a budget. In fact, my wife's definition of money was, if there's a checkbook in the checkbook, sorry, if there's a page in the checkbook, there's money in the bank. And she wouldn't have cared what the balance was. So I embarked on what I would say was a 10-year journey to really try and understand how economics worked, how money worked, etc., etc. And I tell you what, boy, did I learn some stuff. That again, most people are just purely blind or heads buried in the sand, don't want to hear it. And, that's where we are. But I do really feel the next 2 to 3 years is going to be really difficult. So I think.
Can you just share a little
Well,
bit about what, not what you're going to be doing in the States, but why you wanting to go there?
Yeah, well, when I first joined the church, like everybody else, everybody will have a reason for joining the church. Mine was one of, while I love my parents, and I don't want anyone to misunderstand what I'm saying, but they worked hard. They taught me the principle of work, but I can never remember that family unit, if that makes any sense. It was always, my dad was at work because he was a firefighter, so he would be on nights. My mum would go to work. So me and my brother, we were kind of left to our own devices a lot. So that family thing was never really what it was. And funny enough, I had this conversation with you the other day about, do you remember that when you were saying about you moving into your little house? Well, right away, it triggered a memory of the little house on the prairie. Now, whenever I used to watch that, I'd end up crying, literally. And I'm like, I'd be a teenager when that first came out.
Yeah.
But what it was doing, it was reminding me of something that was obviously important to me, which was this family unity. So I can't recall having that as a child. So, while I love my parents, they worked hard, all of that stuff. That family bond wasn't where it should have been. And to be fair, I was my father was quite abusive towards me as well, which didn't help. But the issue was I didn't know any better. So at the age of 20, when I first met Pat at 18, and we got together when I was 19, married at 21, and all that stuff. But that family was crucial to me, and I did everything that I could to make sure that the family was right. And then I adopted Stuart to Pat's previous marriage, and then we had Laura, which was a blessing because Pat was told she'd never have children. But anyway, cut a long story short, we got to the point where I just knew something was wrong, something wasn't right, and I didn't know what it was. I kind of had three questions: Why are we here? What's the point? Where did we come from? Where are we going? And whenever we got together as a family, and births, marriages, deaths, and all that stuff, I would always target the priest or the bishop, whoever was the minister, and I'd go up and said, "Can you tell me what is this all about? Come
What's
on,
the
you're
point?
supposed to be,
Yeah.
you're supposed to have the answers to life. What?" And you know what? Not one of them could come up with the answers. I even remember having I won't mention the religion. I don't want to be disrespectful to it, but I went up to one guy. I said, "Do you actually believe that there's life after death?" He said, "You know what? I don't know." And I thought, what? You're preaching from the gospel, the Bible, and you don't even know that there's an afterlife. Anyway, so lo and behold, at the age of 25, I got the old proverbial knock on the door, and the Mormon missionaries knocked on the door, and they asked could they come and share a message. Now, being the kind of people that me and Pat were, we were courteous, we didn't have any issue. Yeah, we said, yeah, come in. Anyway, cut a long story short, they taught us the gospel, and I said, you know what, that's lovely, really like it, but there's no place for God in my life right now. So we've become very good friends. Even to this day, I still go over the States and visit one of the elders who baptized me. But anyway, so got to the point where I said, thanks, but no thanks. And didn't hear from them for about 3 days. And next minute, he knocked on the door and he said, "Paul, we've got a message for you." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Look, don't want to have a discussion, don't want to say anything, but we've been instructed to give you this tape." Now, I don't know whether you're old enough to remember a cassette tape, but
Yeah,
it was
just
the old disc tape. Anyway, so I said, "What is it?" He said, "Just watch it, and we'll call back tomorrow, and we'll pick the tape up." That's all he said. Well, it was Families Are Forever, if you remember that tape. Well, I bawled like a baby because that video answered all of those questions that I had. Where did we come from? Why were we here? And where did we go after life? And that 20-minute, 30-minute video, whatever it was, answered all of those questions. Anyway, they came back the following day, and I said, "I'll be baptized on Sunday." And it was game over. The rest of it was history. But right from early on, Kirsten, when I started to read it, the only scriptures that ever stood out to me was about the second coming of Christ.
same.
And I must have read Revelations about 20 times. Well, I think that's why we met.
I honestly feel like I look back over my life too. Like I was born, my parents were members, so I was born into it, sort of went my teenage way and, had a party life for a while. But then curiosity brought me back. It was like, there's got to be more to life than what I'm doing. I was having fun, but there's got to be more to life than fun. And so, yeah, I started meeting up for folk art lessons with my auntie and my mum. And so the conversation would go to Revelations. And that's when this spark was lit in me, like, what? The moon's going to turn to blood? Like all these things. I had this fascination early on with the supernatural, like the scary stuff, the vampires, all these kind of things. And I think it was all preparation to where I am today. I just feel like I was being prepared for where I was going to be today. Because you've got to, in order to understand good, you've got to understand evil, right?
Absolutely. And what was interesting, Kirsten, because I kind of, again, even today, my favorite film in the whole world is Van Helsing.
I haven't even seen that.
Oh, you got to watch it. Van Helsing.
I'll put that on my homework list.
One with what's his name? That guy.
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh Jackman. That's the guy. Anyway, what I come to learn from watching those type of films was that they're biblical. They are biblical, but they're not talked about. There's vampires and zombies and the living dead and all of that stuff, all in the scripture.
And it's all predictive programming. We're watching it. They're telling us what's coming. And what's all
and
there
then
already? Yeah.
yeah, and then I became again probably 20 years ago now. I started reading scripture about the giants, and I'm thinking, hold on, what's all
Yeah.
that about? And again, movies, Sinbad the Sailor with the one eye, all of that stuff. And then I started studying Greek literature and all the gods, talk of gods and demigods. And I thought, hold on. I mean, you've got to have some imagination to come up with that stuff.
Yeah.
And I started watching it and I started studying it and I started looking at cultures and I thought, there isn't a culture on the planet that doesn't have giants,
I know.
zombies,
Vampires.
vampires. And I'm thinking, well, hold on. One continent you can kind of get it wrong, but all of them getting it
Yeah,
wrong.
exactly.
So again, I went,
Even down to Bigfoot.
yeah,
Everyone's got stories of Bigfoot.
yeah, and we have a story, funnily enough, which again doesn't get talked about. And I've never seen this documented, and I'm perhaps put myself out there for another hangman's noose. but what's new?
Yeah, what's new?
There was a story I heard it again 20 odd years ago that apparently the prophet Joseph Smith met Cain
Yeah, I've heard
because
that too.
because we know that Cain was marked never to leave or
Yeah.
be killed, and he was to live. Now, you know yourself, if you're going to hide somewhere, you kind of hide in plain sight.
Yeah.
So anyway, my understanding of it was the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever words you want to use, it was reputed to have been Cain.
Wow. Well, who knows at this
So
point? Yeah.
yeah, and
I
again,
don't discount anything I hear anymore.
no, not now.
It's not saying that I believe everything that I hear, but I certainly don't think, oh no, that's not true. Like, because everything I thought was true my whole life
Yeah,
turns
yeah.
out has been a lie. I'm talking about the world in general.
But here's the thing: those who were brave enough, and I can certainly go back to stuff that I've studied, and I mean, in fact, we've had these conversations. Things like aliens and all of that stuff. Ask yourself this question, because this one always baffled me until I really got into it. Could you imagine a civilization so advanced that they could create a spaceship and they could travel light years, and then they get to Earth and crash? Come on,
Yeah.
get real, get real.
Exactly.
So I would question that. I thought, well, what if they crash? Why are they crashing? What caused the crash? And the conclusion that I came up, well, it wasn't a conclusion, it's evidence, I think now, if you look far enough, they weren't crashing coming to the Earth, they were crashing because they were on the Earth trying to get off it.
It's just the dome.
It's all to do with the dome, the shape of the Earth. Because if you go to, you see, you do remember this stuff, don't you? If you go into particularly Jewish scripture, the original Hebrew, and even further back, even Aramaic, before all the translations of words, because everything's been lost in translation.
Yeah.
Even thing like, we had this discussion in Sunday school a few weeks back about the word fear the Lord. And I said, you know what, that's the most mistranslated word in the whole Bible. They went, what? I said, how can a loving God ask his children to fear him? What's that all about? And anyway,
It doesn't make sense.
it doesn't make sense.
No.
But when you look at the original translation, it actually translates revere the Lord, i.e., hold him in such high esteem and glory that you want to honor him, you want to serve him, you want to be obedient. But the word fear never ever equated with me. And even to this day, I mean, I'll openly say it in front of anybody. If my God wants me to fear him, he's not my God.
Exactly right.
End of. But anyway, so that's what's happened with translation, because what people don't know, and again, this is something that, I'm a great believer, people don't know what they don't know. Up until the early 1800s, you didn't read or write anyway. So the only person that told you anything that in relation to literature or reading was either the schoolmaster or school teacher or your priest or
Yeah.
minister. And that translation that took place, they had to come up with words that fitted the vernacular of the culture. So some of the Jewish words they had no language for. They had no well, think if I said to you now, think of an animal that roars like a train, that has the speed of a leopard, that puffs out smoke. What am I describing?
I don't know.
A train.
I was going to say it roars, but you said it roars like a train.
Sorry, roars like a lion.
Ah.
Yeah. So when John the Beloved was
when he's trying to
writing
describe things, yes.
when he's writing on the on the island of Pitmer, when he was exiled and imprisoned, he was being given visions of things that he had no vernacular for whatsoever. How do you describe a train to somebody who's never seen a train?
Plane.
Or
Bombing.
a plane?
Yeah.
Do you know in ancient? I mean, I just watched an episode called not Da Vinci, Medici, which is all to do with the ruling class of Florence during the times of Leonardo da Vinci and all of them. Do you know there are more pictures of flying objects during the Renaissance than in any other history in the world?
Wow.
Jacob's ladder going up into heaven, the gates opening, flying objects over the Madonna and the Child. And you look at them and you think, hold on, that's a spacecraft. But they had no vernacular for it. They had no way of describing it. And this is where things like
that's even like cave paintings and stuff have
absolutely
aircraft.
Yeah. And then the giants, people said, oh, I mean, I was, my wife paid for go to Egypt because one of my goals was always to go to Egypt. So for our 25th anniversary, she took me to Egypt.
Wow.
Which was great. And when you go into those temples and you see those 25, 30-foot giants, you think, why were they so big? What was what was going on in the heads of those people who built those things? So
you said giants. Did you mean doorways or something?
Well, even the doors are 30, 40 foot high.
Yeah.
So you got to ask yourself, what were they thinking? Why? Because they were giants. They weren't they weren't making them so to give them all power for making them. They were giants.
Yeah.
And those colossus monuments, they were just literally creating what they saw. So giants were upon us, and then you go into scripture and you can back it up.
It's all there.
when Moses sent out, I think it was Jeremiah and there was Aaron and a few others, they sent them out to go and check the land of Canaan.
Yeah.
Because the Lord promised that the land of Canaan was going to become the Holy Land, the place of promise. And what did they do? They came back and reported that there were giants in the land. But nobody talks about it. Why?
I know.
Why? So here we are now in what I believe is an age where all of those supernatural things that you've just talked about, vampires, we've had conversation about, the resurrection of the Antichrist or the birth of the Antichrist, all to do with, genetics, Christ himself says in Matthew chapter 24, that if he did not cut short the day of his return, there would be no one left alive. Well, what's all that about?
Yeah.
And that, what I believe, is all to do with the zombies and the flesh eating flesh and all that stuff. Because there's going to come a time when there isn't any food, there isn't any water, so what's left? Cannibalism,
Mm-hmm.
And
Which, mind you, they're also trying to use predictive programming with that, like about, to be sustainable, we need to look at human meat
and
to save the planet.
And the global elitist 40 years ago erected the Georgia Stones.
Yep.
And on the Georgia Stones, there are 10 new commandments for humanity, of which it states that the population size must be no more than 500 million out of 7.8 billion people. Seriously? No one's ever challenged that.
Yep.
No one's ever challenged it.
And why is it not everywhere? Why are people not talking about this everywhere? Like, what the hell? There's these big, mind you, they got broken.
They got damaged. They got damaged recently.
Yeah.
It's as if like God struck it. So where we find ourselves now is, you asked the question, what I think all of that, believe it or not, was related to the reason why I'm going to America. But I always felt from early on in the church that I was always going to be part of the building of Zion. Now, I never quite understood what that meant at the time, but I just knew whenever I read anything to do with the building of Zion, and funny enough, this Sabbath gone Sunday, guess what hymn we sung? Beautiful. Zion, beautiful Zion. So that was like a confirmation following the conversation I had with Brett and Tracy and yourself, because you also raised it in the group, and Mark raised it, and a few others. But what it did, it reminded me of what I've known for 30 odd years, that I was somehow going to have some part to play. And what was interesting on that, Kirsten, because it even shook me, this, because I've had all of this in my head for 37 years, but things started happening, and I'll be open and honest with you, even our relationship as business partners, friends, we kind of hit a brick wall, and I thought, what is going on? We went from being literally best of friends, business partners, everything was going honky-dory, then bang, somebody just smashed us into a wall. And I believe that had to happen, because what it did, it made me reflect on me. Who was Paul Gunson? What did I really want? What was this all about?
Yeah.
You reflected. You said, well, hold on. Is this who I really want to be?
Yeah.
And I think, had that not have happened, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
This is what we needed to come back to.
Well, that was it. We needed to step back. Because we'd come so far forward that we hit a brick wall that we couldn't get over. And we couldn't get beyond it. So the only way you can do is to step back, reevaluate where you are. What was the purpose? What was the goal? What was the objective? And it brought all of that back. So I went off on a different direction. I said, well, what was my original goal? Well, my original goal is I was a life coach. I dealt with mental health. We even had our own channel where we were looking at mindset stuff. So I kind of went down that route. I kind of thought, well, hold on, I need to get myself right. I need to get my mind right, get focused, get back to where I was. And you kind of followed a similar path. So what it reminded me of was, hold on, I've forgotten what my goals were. What were my goals? So my goal was to go and be part of Building of Zion. My goals were to help as many people as I could, to lift people and to help people and all of that stuff. Now, you can't do that in today's world without a lot of money.
Yeah.
You can't do it. So we were going down a path that we were making some good money at some point. And then it kind of again hit a brick wall, and we had to back up, and we had to go a little little detour, go around it another way. And we have done, and we're having some success with that. But for me, I had to go back to where my true values were, at the expense, shall I say it, of potentially and almost losing you as a business partner and a dear friend, shall I say. And I'm not afraid to say that now. I wouldn't have said that 10 days ago, but now I can
Oh,
reflect
trust
back.
me, we were close. We were
Yeah,
close to it all
and
just
I
going.
believe the adversary, Satan, Lucifer, whatever word you want to be, he knew that if he could stop us, he was potentially going to stop something incredible happening.
Mm.
And if you remember back to June, July, when we kind of hit that hurdle, I said to you, and you'll probably recall it, I said, you know what, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but September is going to be a significant
Yeah.
month. And from a Jewish calendar point of view, which we know is not accurate, but as far as the spirituality of what the Jewish people believe, September is the month of all the feasts.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's always a shift. You talked about blood moons, you talked about, all of that kind, tabernacles, and, even the red heifers being imported into Jerusalem, and all of that symbolizing that we're getting close to the third temple being built. So all of that was going on in September. And I made two connections. I was looking at what we were doing in the financial world, which is, we had a couple of platforms. One of them is a licensed product in Brazil. It's legal, it's audited, it's positive, and it's in the crypto DeFi space. And I thought, well, we're on this path. What's all this about? Because I definitely felt I was being directed on this as we were as a business at that time. And I struck up a conversation with a couple of guys who's an hedge fund manager for a crypto company in Brazil and in the UK, and he's in our ward. And then I had another conversation with a guy who it turned out that he's doing crypto, who's Brazilian. So I said to him, well, what are you doing? He said, well, funny enough, he said, I'm buying land in America. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And he said, well, why? I said, well, that was something that I was going to do 2.5 years ago before my wife passed. I said, I had a business and still do have a business in America, but it was dormant. I couldn't do nothing because I wasn't there. And he told me what his business was. He's buying land. And we had this conversation only yesterday. And I went, I can't believe this. He said, why? I said, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I said, but whereas you're doing it 5-6 hours south of where I was doing it, which was north up by Adamonte Armand, it was basically the same goal. So anyway, we got into a conversation, and I said, I need to know what you're doing. And he basically gave me the opportunity to come into the business, which then Brett mentioned that he felt that was being called to Missouri.
Mm.
And then that took me back to where I was thinking, which was that conversation we'd had when kind of things went pear-shaped. And then he said to me, well, do you know about Paul? You're Paul. I said, no, not that I know of. What's he been up to now? What's he done? You know what I mean? And he said, well, do you know that he was approached by I think he said an apostle or a general authority, I can't remember what he said now.
Authority,
Yeah, the general authority was that, Paul was basically told, you need to come to Missouri and be part of the building of the temple. And I went, wow. Because I couldn't recall ever having that conversation with you.
No, we
No,
never had that conversation.
no. And here I was being told, well, but all of that, Kirsten, all happened literally within about 2 or 3 days of each other. And I thought, I can't believe this. So I grabbed hold of that with two hands like you wouldn't believe it. Do you know what? And again, we said this again several months ago, when the window of opportunity opened up, I had to be ready for it. So I felt that had me not have hit that brick wall and had all of those issues, I think I would have missed this window.
Yeah.
Now, because I kind of cleared my head, I got it, got myself all where I needed to be. When I heard that message come at me again, like, wake up, we're here again, I thought, right, I've got to act on it. And I
Yeah.
did. I made that decision to sell. So right now, my plan is to go over to the US well, certainly it'll be no later than February, and use the proceeds of my mortgage, our house, or what we've worked all our life for, to start to build Zion.
Yep, beautiful. And it's funny because so you said you're going February. Brett and Tracy and I and my Paul, my husband, we've decided that we're going to go in about April. We're going to spend hopefully about 6 weeks. We're talking about buying one of those decked out school buses and just cruising around and go. And that
Yeah.
I'm thinking, because he's in contact with some people over there in church that he's just met online, and they said that there was a ward there that was a tiny little branch not so long ago, and now it's overflowing as a ward. And he said you talk to anyone in the ward and they'll all give the same answer, that they don't know how they ended up there, just that they knew that that was where they were supposed to be.
Possibly.
So
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping that when I go over there, I'll find my people. You know what I mean? Like, because it's certainly not down here, not down the road at my chapel. They're not my people. So I'm hoping to find my people there, like to give me that, just to slot me back into where I need to be.
And I think that goes back even as far as what President Nelson said about, the gospel was to be taught at home. Even your Tracy, when she said about, why have I just spent 4 years learning all about the political system? I said, well, trust me, I've looked at the population of Branson, and there's not many people there. So maybe they need the Lord there, and you've been prepared, because that's how I see this going. I'm a blacksmith, I'm an engineer, I can build houses. And one of the other steps that I'd forgotten of is I've been in communication with people who are in Texas who build hemp homes out of hemp. It is one of the safest products in the world. It is, it's proven to improve health medicinally, proper usage of it. It's an easy crop to grow. It has a turnaround of 90 days, and you can grow 3 to 4 crops a year. So guess what we're going to be buying? We're going to be buying a lot of land to grow hemp.
Yeah.
Because this guy is a British architect who's now living in Texas, and I've got that contact. And that was another contact I kind of forgot about.
Yeah, but it's like everything's sort of coming together and just forming this new picture. And it's all just going bing, 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 bing.
And instead of buying, houses of $500,000, not that I'm opposed to having a £500,000 mansion, because I've got a lot of things I've got to do, but these hemp homes are anything from 10,000 to 30,000, so very, very easy to build. They're almost like a kit where you can just literally you can import the hemp, but Aberdaugh would say we're going to grow our own. And the issue there is all of these little dominoes came together, and I thought, this is it. This is what I've been waiting 37 years for in answer to that question. So
exciting times.
Yeah, and then even when we had conversations earlier on about me coming to New Zealand, because I felt like, you, Paul, Brett, Tracy, the other Tracy, Briars, Yvonne, who's become a really dear friend as well. I felt that I was being drawn towards New Zealand. No, I wasn't. I was being drawn to you people.
Yeah.
That's what as you say, I was being drawn to my tribe.
Yeah.
So can you imagine now if we've all got that same shared vision where we're going to go to Missouri,
Yep.
build Zion, because I do believe the church are not going to announce Zion. People are going to be called. The elect will be called. So that's why the likes of us are misfits. Not because we're misfits, but because the Lord had to set us apart, because the general flow, they won't get this. we'd be talking way over their head.
Yeah,
I
a bit
remember
like
when
general conference. It's very general. Yeah.
yeah, well, well, again, before COVID came, I went over to meet a group of people because I was planning on doing this, as I say, 4 years ago. And I went to try and connect with a group of saints that were considering themselves. In fact, they've been in some of the conversations we've had, and they are so pompous and righteous, it's untrue. They believe Zion is Salt Lake City. They believe, that's the new Zion. Missouri's not going to happen. It's Salt Lake. Well, I said, actually, I've got news for you. It's not Salt Lake.
Yeah,
I said,
no
read the
way.
scriptures.
One of the
But
most
anyway,
wicked cities in America.
but they don't believe. They think that they are this pure, purebred people. So for me, and what was interesting, and this was the conversation I had with the guy from Brazil. I said, so yeah, so the scriptures of the Lamanites, the 10 tribes of Israel, uh, coming back together. Well, they're a displaced people. They're people that have been spread a little bit like the Jews were spread around the world. Well, the 10 tribes of Israel have been displaced. So we know that they're somewhere up in the North countries, whether that's the Arctic, whether it's Norway, Sweden, or be it wherever. But the promise to them is that they will come unto the land of Zion, that they're going to be gathered to Zion. And then all of a sudden, that light bulb moment took place. They've been displaced. They don't have a home. They don't have a country that they're, known to be the 10 tribes of Israel. So wherever they are, I believe the Lord is going to call those by revelation and say, you're to gather in Missouri. So what better opportunity do we have in the creation of wealth through cryptocurrency and a DeFi nation? Because these nations, their own currency is bankrupt. So for me, the great reset is going to be digital currency. And we've got some really solid platforms and currencies within what we're doing that can serve that purpose.
Mm.
So that when they come from